number one reason that I've found, number one reason why people don't fulfill the call of God in their lives, the number one reason why people backslide, the number one reason why people don't take God seriously, the number one reason why people don't move forward or don't move on is because of this. Ungodly relationships. Another way you can say it is an unordained relationship. Let's take it a next step further. This is the best way I've found to describe it. A man-made relationship. A man-made relationship. You know, there's some things that God ordains. There's some things that God puts together. There's also things that you put together, that I put together. The Bible says, let no man separate what God has ordained. So if people who are married, marriage is a thing that's ordained by God, right? So if God has ordained marriage, why do people get a divorce? If God has ordained friends, why are people not friends anymore? If no one can separate what God has ordained, why do things separate? It's because there's two kinds of relationships. There's relationships, he said it, there's relationships that we put together, but there's also relationships that God puts together. And what God ordains cannot be separated. There's those relationships like me and my sister. As much as we get feisty with each other, no matter what, I will always be her brother. That's an ordained relationship from God. My mom and my dad, no matter what, they will always be my parents. That's an ordained relationship by God. I will never be able to escape it. But a relationship that is not ordained by God can easily be broken because it's not his relationship, it's your relationship. And I think that's the best way to describe it. It's a man-made relationship. But you know what? Anything man-made says, if it goes against the word and it's man-made, you know what it says? It says, I don't trust the way you want it done. I don't trust the way you want to have it done. Therefore, since I don't trust you, God, I'm going to do it myself. That's what we say when we do man-made things. Man-made, especially in relationships. You are never, ever supposed to pursue a man. And I was struggling with it. I was like, no, but Ruth in the Bible laid down at Boaz's feet. But I went earlier in the scriptures, and it actually says that Boaz saw Ruth and asked, who is she? And he pursued her. A woman is never supposed to pursue the man. You were created, you are a prize. Girls, you're a prize. And the man is the one who is supposed to pursue you. A man is the one who's supposed to pursue you. If you pursue, I'm not going to go there. Here we go. I'm going to kind of elaborate a little bit on what he said. There are 5 points, and I think these 5 points have changed my life forever. Let me give you a little bit of background why this means so much to me. I've been saved for almost 3 years now. I gave my life to Jesus on July 30th, 2015, right after I graduated. The best decision I ever made. I've never turned back. I've never gone back. I never went back to drugs. I never went back to partying. I never went back to the girls. I never did any of that again, and I won't. So this is why this means so much to me. Is because the way I treated girls then versus the way I treat girls now has to change. Because dating someone in the world, dating someone whenever you're not saved is different than it is now. When I first got saved, it was in July 30th, 2015. I was an infant in the faith. I wasn't mature yet. I wasn't mature, whatever, however you want to say it. But I was an infant. I was a baby. I didn't even know what salvation meant. But I saw this girl, and I was like, dang, girl. I was like, I did what the Bible says. I pursued, right? And I still think to this day, she's one of the most beautifulest girls I've ever met. I look at her even today, and I'm like, what? This girl is beautiful. She's beautiful. And that's the same thing that I said when I first met her. And so we talked a little bit, and I think it lasted a few months, but in those few months, I grew. In those few months, I got mature. In those few months, I learned. In those few months, I grew up in the faith. And I started to think about this relationship and where I was going with it. And I understood that it wasn't my time yet. And so I talked to this girl, and I told her, I was like, look, I like you. I'm not saying that you're ugly. I'm not saying that I don't like you. But what I am saying is that right now is not my time. And I need to grow in Jesus. I still need to shake some things off. I still have things that I have to do. I still have places that I have to go with Jesus before I go there with anyone else. And we talked about it, and we both agreed. But even then, after I cut it off, I had been used to cutting things off with girls. You know what I'm saying? Like, whenever I was in the world, it didn't matter to me. I didn't care. And this is when I learned that the way we do things in the world and the way we do things in the kingdom of God is different. Because after I had cut it off with her, I felt bad. Even to this day, I feel bad. And I felt so bad for her because, I mean, girls are very emotional. Y'all are very sensitive, and guys just aren't. We're just not. So whenever I did this, it really hurt me. And at that moment, when I started to feel that way for her, I made a decision in my life that I would never, ever put a girl through that again. It doesn't matter how much I like her. It doesn't matter how attractive she is. I will never put a girl through that again. And ever since then, that was like the first few months of my salvation. I'm about to be 3 years old in the faith. And I don't talk to girls like that. I don't go to the next level like that with girls. If we're friends, we're friends. That's as far as it's going to go. So this is why this means so much to me. Because I know I'm not the only one who knows that it's different in the world than it is now. And it has to be. It has to be different. And these are the 5 keys that Tor Roberts gave us to finding your soulmate. And I hope it blesses you the way it blesses me. Because this isn't something that we can play about. This isn't something that we can just try. He said it so well. I don't date. He said, I don't know about dating. Because dating means I'm going to try it. Yeah, let's try it. You know, you want to boo. I want to boo. You know, it's cuffing season. Let's try the dang thing, you know. None of that. None of that. I'm not willing to put anybody's heart on the line, especially my own. And this is a word that has to transform us. Number 1, he said the first thing that we have to have is chemistry. So I looked it up. You know what chemistry means? They had a few definitions, but this was the one that I wanted to focus on. It said it's the complex emotional or physiological interaction between two people. The complex emotional or psychological, the emotional or psychological interaction between two people. Let's break that down. Emotional and psychological. Chemistry is an emotional or psychological interaction between two people. You know what emotional is? It's a feeling. What are emotions? They're a feeling. So the first thing that we have to have is a feeling for someone. We have to have an emotion for someone. But how many of you know that God is bigger than a feeling? He is bigger than an emotion. So whenever we're getting into a God-ordained relationship, it has to be bigger than a feeling. It has to be bigger than an emotion. You know, we can't find ourselves saying, it just feels right. It just feels like it's my time. We can't fall into that. Not only isn't it emotional, but it's a psychological interaction between two people. When you have chemistry with the person, you think the same way. That has to be the first sign to finding the person that's meant for you. You have to think the same way. Think the same way. For us, it has to be, man, all I want to do is please God. So for her or him, that should be the way they think. All I want to do is please God. We have to think the same way. And, you know, we'll find ourselves saying, they just get me. You know, they just get me. They just get me. And that's good. They have to get you. Because we have to have not only an emotional feeling, but we have to think the same way. We have to be on the same page. But be careful. Because sometimes the only reason people will get you is because y'all deal with or are dealing with the same kind of bondage. Did y'all get that? Let me break it down. For instance, let's say you just got delivered, right? And the thing that you were struggling with was lying. Let's just say lying. You were a liar your entire life, right? And you just got delivered. And then there's this other guy. Oh, we got some liars in the room, I can tell. They're like, let's say someone gets delivered from lying, right? And then another person gets delivered from lying as well. And they couple together. Liars. They both struggled with the same thing. So the connection that they or the chemistry that they have might not be that they both love Jesus, is that they're both battling with lying. Let's take it to another level. It could be alcohol. This person was an alcoholic and she got delivered, and now she's at church every Sunday. And this guy, he just got delivered. He was still at Fuego on Saturday, but on Sunday he came. And he's talking about how he was just at Fuego, and her, even though she's saved, she says, you know what? Yeah, man, I still struggle with that. And there's chemistry there because they both dealt with the same thing. And that might be the only reason why y'all connect. So you have to be really careful on where the chemistry is coming from. It can be just like I said, you want to boo, I want to boo, chemistry, Number 2, he said there has to be a connection. Connection is a step further than chemistry. Remember, chemistry is just we think the same way. But a connection, listen to this. This is the definition that I got for it. It's the placing of parts of an electrical circuit in contact so that a current may flow through it. Ooh. It has to flow through it. This is the picture that I got in my head. If this is where I am, no, I'm going too far. Hang on. We're going to get there. It's the placing of parts of an electrical circuit in contact. So it's two things that are on fire for Jesus. It has to be electric, right? When you're with God, you're on fire. You're like a freaking lightning bolt. We were at a church last night, and I went to go pray for this lady. And as soon as I put my hand on her, you should have seen her, man. Bow! She just, it was like my hand was, it's like I had an electric current in my hand. I'm not a liar. He saw it, he saw it, he saw it, he saw it. They were all there. Ish saw it. I just went up to her. I was praying for everybody. I put my hand on her. Bow! It was like electricity just came in her body. And that's how it is whenever you're filled with God. So it's two things coming together so that something can flow through them. This is the step that I want to take it to. The Bible says, do not be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. And so many people stop right there. And he goes to church, so he must be the one. We both go crazy when fullness goes on, so he must be the one. When Set of Fire comes on, man, we get next to each other and he must be the one. But I'm here to tell you that it's more than chemistry, and it's more than just being equally yoked with a believer. It goes further than that. It's not just dating someone who's saved. It's dating someone who is on your level. Because if the world is on this side and the kingdom is on this side, even if you are both on this side, you can both be on different levels. There's infancy, there's childhood, and then there's adulthood in the kingdom. So this is the step that I want to take it to you. Do not be unequally yoked. This doesn't only mean to couple yourself with someone who is not saved. The Greek word for unequally yoked is one word, and it's a word that I cannot pronounce. But this is what it means. It's a compound word that means this: to yoke up differently, to associate discordantly, or unequally yoked together. The part I want to break down to you is that word discordantly. This word right here, to associate discordantly, that word means to disagree. How many of you know that you can be saved and still disagree about some things? You know what I'm saying? You can be saved, you can be super saved and still be like, I just don't agree. You know what I'm saying? On Sundays, if you want to see somebody disagree, come and watch us figure out what we're going to eat. We all saved after a Sunday. Oh, praise the Lord. We ain't going to that taco truck, cuz I don't care what. We are not going to. We disagree with some things. And we're saved. That word, unequally yoked, it means to associate discordantly. It means to do not be with someone who you don't agree with. This is why it's important to be equally yoked in the kingdom. Because if you're up here in adulthood and the person you're coupling yourself with is in infancy, how can God flow if you are not even connected? If you're up here and she's down here or he's down here, how can God flow? God likes to go through. But if he comes through you and has to fall out, come all the way back down through here just to get to your spouse, it's going to be really tough for God to move through y'all. It's hard for God to flow through a couple that is not on the same level. Please be careful. Just because they're in the church doesn't mean they're the one for you. Just because you have chemistry doesn't mean they're the one for you. Even for connection, you have to be connected with them. Not only do you have to think like them, you have to be connected. Let me show you why. If you marry someone who is not on the same level as you, what if God is calling you to a 3-day fast and the person you are married to says it's time to go on vacation and we're eating like pigs? All you want to do is get in the presence of God, but this person wants to go and eat like a pig. They will have stripped you from what God has called you to do. What if your heart, even though y'all are both saved, what if your heart is to be in the presence of God every night because you work the night shift and the person you marry only wants to be in the presence of God at night and wants to have family breakfast every morning? You have to sacrifice your time with Jesus to be with the person you married. 2 different levels. What if the person you marry only wants to read once a day and you want to read 3 times a day? What if the person you marry wants to pray as a family every single morning, but the person you marry, or what if you want to pray every single morning as a family, but the person you marry wants to sleep in? I remember when I wasn't saved, and I wasn't saved for a long time, but I remember because I moved my room into the living room, and every single morning I would hear my parents praying in the living room, praying for me, praying for my friends, praying for my sister. I would just hear them and I'd get so pissed. So mad. I would get so mad. I'd be like, why do y'all have to pray every morning? Even today, I still hear them. I'm like, why are y'all praying? I'm trying to sleep. But that is a couple who is connected, not only spiritually, but on the same level. They wake up every single morning and they pray together. Even to this day, they don't fail. You have to be on the same level. On the same level. It is hard for God to flow through a couple that's not on the same level. Number 3, he said wholeness. Wholeness. If you're not whole, you will place a demand on a person that they could never live up to. If you're not whole, and you find a person and you're my life, have you ever heard anybody say that? You're my life, you're my everything. Everything, bro. Like, hold up now. Everything. What happens, if God forbid she passes away or he passes away? I'm going with it. No, you're not. What happens when what happens when you are not whole and you place that demand on a person? You're giving them a demand or a level that they can never reach in your life. You're setting them up for failure. When you expect a person to make you whole, that person has now taken the place of God in your life. Let's take it to the next level. Not only have they taken that place, but you have given them the position of God in your life. Now that person becomes God in your life. If they're supposed to make you whole, then it's their responsibility to make you happy each and every single day. It's their responsibility to provide for you. It's their responsibility to be your joy, your happiness, your satisfaction. But what happens the day you wake up and they're not there? You have to be whole before you get married. This is the fourth one. This is where the body of Christ messes up. Please listen. Number 4, you have to have a divine confirmation. A divine. I turned to the book of Songs of Solomon, and he said, no, you have to have a word from God. From God. You need a word from God. One of the things he said that really hit me is he said, our spiritual life and our relationship life is not separate. Our spiritual life and our relationship life is not separated. All of our life is God's. If we will ask God to send us to Bible college or to open a door for us, why won't we ask him if this is the one for us? It's not separate. One of the greatest examples that I've seen or heard of is Ted Shuttlesworth Jr. Y'all know Teddy, right? Teddy. So this is what Teddy did. Teddy was leading worship, and through those doors, he saw a woman, and this is how he explains it. He says the doors of heaven opened up. Doves were flying all around her. The wind was blowing through her hair, and she walked in, and Teddy says, she's the one for me. He said it was like a movie. That's how he explains it. And you know what he did? He went on a 3-day fast. Because when he saw her, he liked what he saw. And he was like, yep, she the one. You know what he did? He didn't go ask the pastor for a word. He didn't go ask her parents for a word. He didn't ask her best friends if she was single. Come on, somebody. How many of you know boyfriends and girlfriends aren't even biblical? It's not even biblical. It's not biblical. People be like, she got a boyfriend. I don't see that in my Bible, yo. If it's God, he gonna give it to me. It doesn't matter who thinks they got her. That is not biblical. Boyfriend. Is that like some kind of Greek word that they didn't translate right or something? Because it's not in the Bible. What a gentleman. What a gentleman. God knew that you wouldn't have to try, that you would know. You wouldn't have to try. You would know. Man, that's so good. He did this. As soon as he saw her walk through the door, he went on a 3-day fast. And he asked God to give him a yes or a no. He fasted and prayed for 3 days and said, God, if this is the woman for me, I need you to give me a yes or a no. And he says on the 3rd day that God gave him a yes. You know what the first thing he did was? He called her up. She was at work. He said, can we go on a date? Can we go on a date? And she was like, yeah, we can go on a date. So he invited her to the movies and dinner. And he says whenever she got out of work, he was right there waiting for her. And she asked, can I go home to change? He said, no, we need to go to the movie and dinner now. Oh my goodness. This is what he says he did. On the first date, that day, he did 2 things a man without a word from God should never do. He did 2 things, and he told her 2 things that a man without a word from God should never do. This was them. Number one, on the first date. On the first date, he says, I love you. On the first date, she's like, you don't even know my favorite color. I love you. This is the second thing he says. You are my wife. This man says, I love you and you are my wife. On the first date. That's a man with the word from God. You know what she said? This is how you know it's God. You know what she said on the first date? I know. She said, I know. And they've been married for, I believe, 11 years now. I think they have 3 children. That's a man with a word from God. And his ministry hasn't downgraded. It hasn't went lower. It's only gotten bigger. It's only gotten better. That's a man with a word from God. You know what Pastor Jose did on his first date with Pastor Martha? He got into the whip. You know what I'm saying? He got into that thing. Pastor Martha was right here, right? He had a stick shift. It was in neutral. And as soon as she gets in, he goes to first gear. And he looks at her. And he says, if it's God's will, we'll be friends. And then he goes to gear number 2. And if it's God's will, we'll be more than friends. The first date. And then he goes to gear number 3. And then he looks at her. But if it's God's will, we're going to get married. On the first date. And they got married. Look at them. Now they have 2 children. One of them is in the ministry and one's running from the ministry. But she's going to be in the ministry no matter what. She's going to be a mighty woman of God whether she wants to be it or not. I promise you she will. She's running now, but she's going to do the dang thing. She's going to be one of the strongest women we've ever seen. I promise. That you have to have a divine confirmation from God. A divine confirmation from God. And number 5. This one is the biggest one. Man, if you can't do nothing else right now, do this. Know your purpose. Know your purpose. Know your calling. Because your purpose and your calling will change your life forever. You have to know who you are and what you're giving to someone for the rest of their lives. Think about it like this. What happens when you marry someone off of chemistry and your chemistry was only on the fact that y'all were both broken, that y'all were both lustful, that y'all were both alcoholics, that y'all were both liars, or you have some kind of, I'm not trying to no, but what if the only reason y'all had chemistry was because y'all were both broken? And one day, you wake up and you are whole and you realize that you've been married to a person for 30 years that you never needed. What happens when you marry a person based off of chemistry only to have children with them? And you get delivered one day, you get set free. You wake up one day, look next to you and realize you never needed them. And this was not the person that God had for you. What will happen if you go on a 7-day fast? Glory to God. What will happen if you go on a 7-day fast and ask God to reveal your purpose to you, and He calls you to live as a missionary in Nepal, but you've been married to someone who's called to Houston, Texas? What happens when God calls you to Iraq to be a missionary, to preach the gospel, but you are married to someone who has never, ever wanted to leave the United States? If you don't know your purpose before you get married, you are giving someone a counterfeit version of yourself. If you don't know who you are before you get married, you're giving a counterfeit version of yourself to a child of God for the rest of their lives. Two things happen when you find your purpose after marriage. This is what can happen. Two things happen if you wait to marry someone and then find your purpose. Two things happen. Number one, you will strip the person that you love from their God-given calling only to fulfill yours. You will strip the person that you love from their God-given purpose only to fulfill yours. Or number two, you will know exactly what God has called you to do and never get to do it because the person you married didn't get the call. You did. We'll get there. Is this helping you? All right. Those were the notes. Now we're gonna take it a step further, and I'm gonna have Stephanie and Mario come up, and we're gonna do a little bit of some questions and answers, just because I think it's very important. Very important. I don't know if you know this about Mario and Stephanie, but they're a couple sent to this church by God. And they're pregnant. They're being obedient to their pastor because pastor said, we need more children. So he was like, hey, I'm going to give them to you, pastor. Is both of the microphones working? That's way too small. There's the microphone for you. Can we get a microphone for the people in the crowd, please? It's on. Yeah. Here you go.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Make sure you get it. You just give it to everybody. That was good, huh? That's good stuff. I promise, when I heard that word, it changed my life forever. I was like, that's it? I'm waiting another 10 years. Maybe 4. That's still too small.
You're always changing it, Rudy.
A woman's heart should be so hidden in God that it would take a man to seek him in order to find her. That's good. That's true, though. You have to be, this is how I've heard it best explained. It's a love triangle with God at the top, woman on the left, man on the right. And when man goes to seek God, the only way that the woman the woman has to go and seek God so much because it's the man's job to pursue and the woman's job to be holy and patient. Well, of course, the man has to be holy too, but, the man pursues the wife. So it's God at the top, and the woman has to be so far, so high in God that the only way the man can reach her is he has to find God too, and he has to meet her there. That's good stuff, right? Man, that I believe that's a word that changed my life forever. So we're going to have questions and answers. This is a couple, they're a testimony that you can make it. That you can make it. You can make it. And I just want them to share a little bit with us and be here for answers and questions that you may have for a married couple in the faith. And, what kind of, let me ask you guys this. Or Turo, you have a question. Go ahead and answer. In the microphone, please.
That was actually a question for what you were talking about in the moment, not. But can I still ask?
Yeah, go ahead and ask.
The question was because you were talking about how after 30 years you find yourself finding the calling that God had in your life, and then you find yourself. You realize that you stripped the person that you love and that you married them of their calling. And I was just going to ask, do you go to hell if you do that to them?
No, I don't think you go to hell. Tough. That is tough. But that's what happens because if you marry someone who, like I said, who's called to Houston, Texas, and you're married to them, and one day you all of a sudden ask God, Lord, what do you want me to do? And God tells you that your whole life you were supposed to be a missionary in Nepal. Only two things can happen. You tell that person, look, God's calling me to Nepal. I need to go over there. So either they go with you or y'all split up. You know? So either that person is going to sacrifice the call that God has given them to go with her or you, or you will never get to fulfill the call on your life because you have a family you have to raise now. You have kids you have to look after. You have a job, you have so much. You have so much to do already. And that's why it's really important to know your calling, because there are people, there's this, one of my friends, she lives in Brazil, and her sister and her brother-in-law, they're married and, of course, brother-in-law, but they're both missionaries. That's a perfect example how God ordained them to be together because they both have a heart for missions. One of them's not like, well, I'm called to the local church to teach and to train. And the other one's like, no, I need to go to the nations and I need to spread the love of God as a missionary. That's division. That's a house divided against itself. The word says that a house divided against itself cannot stand. So there's unity in the word of God. There's unity when God brings them together. So not only is, God didn't call one of them to be a missionary. He called both of them to be a missionary. And that's how their marriage will work. Because they both have a heart for the people in Nepal. They both have a heart for missions. And some people don't have the heart for missions. Some people will be like, look, I love God, but this is where God's calling me. He's not calling me to the mission field. And I don't believe that you'll go to hell. I just believe, number one, you tell that person, and because they're your spouse, they'll either drop everything that they're doing with you and they'll go with you, or they'll say, look, I love you, but this is what God has called me to do, and I'm not going to do anything else. Therefore, you will have to sacrifice your calling. Any other questions? All right, let me ask this question. So, I love you guys. I honor y'all. Y'all are awesome. And what would be some advice that you could give us, some of us are single, some of us are dating. What would be some advice? Because y'all made it. What would be some advice that you could look back and tell your single self? Or when you were looking, what would be some advice that you could go back 3 years from now, 4 years from now, and tell yourself?
Well, I will give the advice like, don't chase for that person, don't go out there thinking that they're going to come to you either. I think it's more like just praying and waiting on God's time, and that person would appear in front of you whenever, it's God's time. If you rush it, you're going to commit a mistake. You're going to, get in that relationship, maybe go into, having sex and all the other stuff and all the above, have a kid, and then you don't have a job, and then you have to struggle, and it just keeps on going if you just, have that mistake.
I agree with him, and
Unity.
no, yeah, I really do agree with him, and exactly what he said, like I didn't chase him, and so, and the thing is like a little bit of our story is like we were actually really good friends. So he was a sophomore, I was a junior at the time, and we were just friends, and we were like talking to other people at the time and stuff like that. And so finally, I was a senior, and he was a junior, and so.
I walked her to her class one day, and I felt chemistry, but at that time she didn't know that I liked her, or I had feelings for her. So I gave her a strong hug, and I let her go. And then that same day, it was on a Friday. That Friday I went to church, and there she was. I didn't know she attended that church, but there she was again. So that day, when service was over. Well, during service, we were worshiping, and I was just looking at her in the front. She was raising her hands and praying, and I was like, man, I really do like her. Like, I want to talk to her. So that same day, I tried taking her home. She said no. She didn't want me to take her home that day either. And so that same night, I prayed. I prayed, and I asked God to show me if she was really the one that I wanted to get in a relationship with. And when we did get in a relationship, we talked about it the first date, and I told her that I wanted her to be the mother of my kids that same day. That same day. And I actually got a little bit emotional that day, and she did too. But I feel like God has put us together for a reason. I feel like we have a strong calling that we're in the same level for marriages, for broken marriages. And, I mean, yeah.
So Stephanie, let me ask you this. Knowing now that you are married and, you finished the good fight of, temptation and waiting for a man and stuff like this, what would you tell a younger, or yourself, if you could look back and tell yourself when you were 16, 17 in high school or in college, what would be some advice that you would want to tell yourself that could keep you waiting for your man, your husband, excuse me?
Yeah. For me, it was pretty much, so in the Hispanic culture, there's like quinceañeras, right? And so then on the day of my 15, it was in my heart that actually, like, so when you have like a Christian 15, you have like a church service before, and then it's like the food. But anyway, and so that day I told my parents and I told my pastor at the time that I wanted to make a promise to God that I wanted to wait till marriage. And so for my case, like, that was something that, that I kept. And then, and I would never forget, freshman year in high school, in my homeroom, there was this guy that he was like, oh, watch, by senior year, you're going to lose your virginity. And I was like, how much you want to bet that it's going to be senior year and I still haven't? And so it comes to be the 4 years, and I still have not lose my virginity. Like, in me, the way I was raised and the way I was brought, and it was just part of me, because I could have been raised that way, but I could have done something different, you know what I mean? But for me, it was just something that I really wanted to wait for that right person. Like, I feel like when you're intimate with someone, it's something so beautiful that, like, you should share it with the right person that God intended you to be with, And so I would just, advise, like just, I just feel like just wait for that person, and like, it's okay. I mean, if you went through something and you didn't, but like, God is a forgiving God, and if you still want to make the decision to wait for that person, you still can, you know what I mean?
So about touching that topic, I don't know how many virgin people are here, but I was one of the ones that waited for my woman, and I got clowned on in high school for. I even had relationships that they'll leave me because I didn't want to have sex with them. So if you are a virgin, I'm proud of you, and just keep on going until you find that right person.
He said, if you're not.
If you're not, it's okay. You're forgiven. But still, just keep waiting. Don't go into that temptation again, because I don't know. I think once you fall into it, it's you have to really be strong with God to come back. You really have to have that relationship, or you're just gonna keep falling back and get in those relationships that you're not supposed to. And if you're dating right now, sorry. If you're dating right now, I recommend you just, your fights are in your knees. So just every night or whenever you pray, just pray. Ask God if this is really the person that He intended you to be with. Because if it's not, then you're gonna have to do some changes.
And actually, to touch on that, Jude chapter 1 actually says, "Lo unto you, God, who are able to keep me from falling." It's God's strength and God's grace that will keep us from falling. I mean, they can speak on that level, and I can take it to the level of us who have failed. I know me growing up, I did fall. I did mess up. I did, and, but here's the thing. Even though you do fall, maybe you did lose your virginity and you lost it, you gave it away. We don't lose it, we give it away. And I was one of those who gave it away. And here's the beautiful thing about God, is that He's a restorer. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, that, behold, you are a new creation. Everything from the past is dead and gone. Behold, you are a new creation. All things have been made new. Literally, when people give their lives to Jesus, you'd be surprised at the things that happen physically in their body. There's testimonies of people who cut themselves and have scars on their arms, have scars on their thighs. When they give their lives to Jesus, not only do they get healed from depression and suicidal thoughts, but they come to find out that night when they are showering that the scars are all gone. It's not only a spiritual renewing, it's a physical renewing as well. And I encourage you too, if you haven't gone that far, don't. It's precious. How cool is it that one day you get to look your husband or your wife in the face one day and say, "I kept my purity just for you." And if you have failed, me, for example, I get to tell my wife one day, "You know what? I did fall, but God gave me back my purity, and I didn't give it to anybody else, and I saved it just for you." It's a beautiful thing when you get to tell people that. It not only shows them that you love them, but it shows them that you honor them, that you really did mean it when you say that. So don't feel bad if you've given it away, because God is a restorer. He will restore you. And one day you get to look your spouse in the face and say, "God gave me back my purity, and I saved it just for you." Praise God. Yeah, any questions? Let's get some wisdom. Uh-oh, it's 2 times. This is what I've heard. I've heard that when you give your wife a ring, it should be 3 months worth of your salary. So if you make $12,000, $15,000 a month, your ring that you buy for her should be around $45,000. $40,000, $45,000. That's what I've heard, though.
Yeah.
Let's
So around that time where I was engaged and I was looking at rings, I was working at a shop making $12 an hour. I wasn't making that much, but I saved enough to buy her a ring. I saved about 3 months, 4 months, maybe, almost my entire paycheck. Working 60 hours, 70 hours. It was tough. But I don't know if I want to say how much the ring was, but the ring was $3,500, $35,000. Yeah, $35,000. That's like, 3,500. Sorry. Ooh, boy, I wish. But yeah, I worked hard for that ring, but it was quite a bit.
Go ahead.
This is for Stephanie. Did you have any Did you have any boyfriends before him?
Yes.
How did you not know they weren't the ones?
So I guess I can say it was like in high school. So I had, like, I guess I can say 2 boyfriends before him, you know. And so, and the sad thing is that, I mean, the first one, he was not, you know, a believer at all. So that I knew right away that it was not going to work. The second one, actually, he was. And he was in the worship team, everything like that. And and so, like, really, like, you know, sadly, the experience, you know, it kind of actually, like because before Mario, like, I went, like, a year and a half, like, without dating. I literally, like, after him, I was, like, en español se dice, I guess, what's the right word? Like, kind of like I lost, you know, like, belief and, like, you know, the believers. I was like, really? And so, but anyway, like, but I would pray to the Lord, and I would ask him, like, if this person is not for me, you see what I don't see. And if this person's not for me, please take him out of my life. And I did the same thing with him. And so, and I saw the difference, you know, in both of them. So.
Any other questions? This is good stuff, y'all. This is really good stuff. Boy, Seabass. Boy, you better not be messing with no girl, Seabass. Nah, my boy Seabass faithful. He faithful. He said, I'm waiting for my wife. Go ahead, sir.
Question. She wanted to ask it, but she told me to ask it. Oh yeah. Were y'all, whenever y'all met, or whenever y'all knew that y'all were gonna get married, I guess before that, whenever y'all started dating, did y'all know that y'all were on the same level, or was there like any difference, or was there any? Did one of y'all have to like grow more spiritually to get to another person's level, or was it just like right off the bat, same level type of stuff?
Well, when we were about to get married, when we were dating, or about to get married? When we were dating? Okay, so when we were dating, when we met at church? Okay, so I was a little bit immature at that time. So at that time, I was like getting there, you know, like I was reading the Bible, I was taking notes, I was praying, but she was doing a little bit more than I was. So she was a little bit higher than me. So whenever I started dating her, I actually started catching up a little bit, like, you know, because I wanted to, she'll tell me to pray in the phone. So we were on the phone, we'll pray together. I would never do that with other relationships. We'll read the Bible on the phone, you know, have Bible study on the phone, because I couldn't really go to her house because her parents, like, didn't really
You better stay at home.
They didn't really want to see me yet. But yeah, that's another thing that I really liked about my wife, that her parents really had a strictly way of her dating. And so they met me, and they told me the first day, I want my daughter back at 10, no later. So every time we'll go out, I'll bring her 9:30 every time. I'll never disrespect them, you know, in that way, or any way, because I wouldn't be here today. So but yeah, you have to really have a good relationship with her parents. You know, most of the time, if they're godly parents, you know.
Yeah, so like for example, how he said, like, he wasn't at the same level, but it can be, if it's meant from God, y'all can reach the same level. So y'all don't have to start off, you know, at the same, if it's from God.
So what would be the advice that you could give some of us whose parents aren't really protective? Like, what would you tell, because you had her parents kind of like setting those boundaries. What would you tell some of us whose parents don't set those boundaries for us?
I think when I was dating, I know when I was dating my wife, most of her strictness came from her parents. So whenever you're dating someone that their parents just let them do whatever they want, you really have to have a little bit of a boundary, or you have to, think, because sometimes they want to do things that are not right, because they never had that education at the house, So I think my advice is just take it slow and step back a little, just analyze and stop things whenever things need to be stopped, and regroup, because if you don't do that, you're going to fall into temptation pretty bad. Yeah. I think we were, this is not a question, but we were, when we started dating, I was 17 and she was 18. And so we were pretty young. And around that time, there was a bunch of friends that were getting either pregnant or, having babies. And we saw them struggle, and we tried giving them advice at that time, but they didn't listen to us. Why? Because we were in the same, to them, we're in the same level as them, because we were, both partners were young, so. But if you can help your friends out, I really recommend y'all to tell them that the right thing to do is wait for God's calling.
Any other questions? So how did you figure out the household choice? Are you asking who chose where to live, or? Chores? Oh, okay. So he's saying, like, how do y'all handle chores and stuff like that? I mean, the Bible's really clear on that. The man works and
Yeah, so
the woman
basically,
cleans.
I work 10 hours a day, and she does the rest.
He does help though, like on the weekends especially, like he does help. He does put his part too. He doesn't only work, because if that was the case, then I don't know, there would be disagreement, but no.
On the weekends, I do wash dishes, I do laundry, and she's pregnant right now. She really can't do a bunch. She really can't be moving a bunch, and I don't want her to work. It's just my side. I think the man should work hard for their woman. I think the woman should stay home and be a home stable mom. But right now she wants to work, so I didn't disagree with her. And actually, if I would have disagreed with her, she wouldn't have the calling to help someone out at work. She actually is speaking to her boss about God, and they're actually reading the Bible together. So if I would have told her, no, don't go to work, it probably would have never got out there,
Any more questions? Anybody? How do y'all
Someone's
go
trying
about
to get married, huh?
Wait.
Finances, honestly, before when we were dating, that was one of the things that I was mostly worried about. And I prayed to God, and you know what God told me? He said, don't worry, everything's going to fall in place. And it did. I saved enough money for the wedding. I saved enough money for my honeymoon. I saved enough money for everything, for food, everything. And I got myself in a place to live. So everything fell in place by praying to God, and God would set the tone in your life, and He would. And if it's the right thing to do, if it's the calling from Him to do that, to get married with your spouse, it's gonna happen, no matter what. And so I never really had trouble with looking for a job. I never really had trouble with any of those things. Thanks to God.
Yeah, but like for an example, like since he does work like 10 hours a day, so like and I'm able to like get on technology like the laptop, my phone. He's not able to use the phone at his job. So like finance wise, like I'm the one online like paying the bills and stuff like that. Like that's where we like team up and help each other out.
Nice. We have a question online. All right. Does anybody? Can you take him the mic? Does anybody else have a question? Anybody? So I'll ask this question just because I was curious about it. And now, how we talked about like being on the same level. Now, would you say that you don't have to be on the same level when you get married, or you have to be on the same level when you're about to take that step? Because I know you guys said that Mario was a little bit down here, you were a little bit here, but that was when y'all first started dating. So is it kind of like y'all stayed like this and then got married, or was it kind of like, yeah, just explain that a little bit more.
On my part, I was a little bit lower than her, but whenever we got engaged, we talked about like what our calling was, what we were supposed to do, what God has talked to us about, and me and her started communicating the level wise, if we were really in the same level to get married, and spiritual. So we prayed for confirmation, and the confirmation did come through, and that's when we decided to get married.
But yeah, like spiritually level speaking, I would consider by the time we got married and we are married that we are.
If you're having trouble getting to that point, there's a bunch of books that can get you there. Yeah, you're not. I mean, it's not like you have to do it on your own. Yes.
You wanted to grow.
Yeah, I wanted to be in the same level before I got married. That's for sure, because I knew if I wasn't in the same level as her, I would have trouble.
Yeah.
I would have problems. Yeah. Yeah, in marriage, there's still gonna be trouble coming your way, but you're gonna have to learn how to overcome it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, a marriage ain't easy. It's not like butterflies and rainbows. There's a bunch to it.
Just some of it.
Yeah, and
We can get to that. That's really important that y'all, or that you, because it's so easy for a person to be on one level and the person they want to marry on a whole nother level. And I think if the person doesn't have not the capability, but the want and the hunger to get to the same level, that's when I think it kind of, like we talked about, like either you would have had holding her back, or she would have had to compromise and come to your level back down, you know? So I think it's really good that, you get to the same level when y'all get married, because this is your forever partner, you know? I can't have no weak wife. You can't have no weak husband. Think about it like this. If you're called to the nations and your spouse is called to a city, your hearts are going to be different. You'll have a heart for more, and they'll have a heart for less. So with the problems that come your way when dealing with the nations, the person who has a heart for only a few won't be able to handle it. And that brings stress on you. So that's really cool.
So something about that happened, I won't say a month ago. She commented, we were eating and she was like, babe, I really want to go to El Salvador because my cousin goes to El Salvador with a missionary group. She wanted to join. So she feels like she has a calling to go over there this summer. So she asked me to go, and I was like, well, actually, I will go with you, you know, so we can both go together. And so, I mean, yeah.
All right, we're We're going to wrap it up there. Does anybody have any questions? Last second questions. Anything? All right. I'll say the last points again, just so we can close out. Just so you can remember them. So number 1 was you got to have what? Chemistry. You got to have a connection, which is stronger than chemistry. It's not just a feeling. Number 3, you got to be whole. You got to be whole. Number 4, you got to have a divine confirmation from God. And number 5, if you don't do anything else, do this. Know your purpose. Know what you're called to do. Know what you're giving to someone for the rest of their lives. Amen. All right, go ahead. I love you guys. Have a good night.